Hello. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on how to create a smart utility network leveraging existing infrastructure from Census, a Xylem brand. I'm Connor Larson. I'm a sales associate at AWWA. I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Here are some tips to enhance your webinar experience. We recommend you close email, instant messengers, and any other programs not currently in use, as they may interfere with the smooth reception of the webinar, causing slide buffering and poor sound quality. Technical assistance can be found at the GoToWebinar technical support page, at the link listed in your handouts and on the slide shown. As soon as you close the GoToWebinar screen to leave the webinar, a window will open with a survey questionnaire. We ask that all of you take a few minutes to answer the survey questions. Your feedback is important to us and help us improve webinar programming. We encourage group participants to pick one person to enter collective responses to the survey and submit them to us. Before we hear from our speakers, I need to inform you that the mention of specific products or services in the webinar does not represent AWWA endorsement. AWWA does not endorse or approve products or services. I am pleased to introduce our distinguished expert for today's program, Tom Galuska. Our panel will be happy to answer your questions. Feel free to submit questions at any time throughout this broadcast by using the question pane at the lower right of your screen. Let's begin. Tom Galuska is a Senior Product Manager, AMR, AMI, for Census, a Xylem brand. Tom will be telling us how to create a smart utility network leveraging existing infrastructure. Take it away, Tom.
All right, well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Before we get started, first and foremost, I hope everybody's doing well during these COVID times. I know it's a trying time for everybody, and we're all trying to just get through it. And so I hope everybody's doing well and they're safe. So thanks for attending. And with that, I'm going to get started. I'm going to talk to you. There we go. The slide's moving. So what's the agenda today? I'll talk a little bit about advanced metering overview. So AMR, its applications, and some AMI applications. Differences between the two, why customers are still choosing AMR over AMI and vice versa. So some market trends. We've got some survey results of utilities that were surveyed as to what's important to them and why they're moving to different technology applications such as AMI. Some of the benefits of the technology and the different advancements within the industry that those of you that have been around for a while have seen many, many changes over the years. And how we look at things today is not the same as how we looked at them 10, 20 years ago. And we're just taking advantage of the technologies that we have today. And then I'm going to wrap it up with a case study of a customer who transitioned from AMR. At the time, the AMR application made sense to them. And now they want to move to AMI, and how they're doing that with legacy technology that they installed, and their advancement, being able to advance using two different technology providers. So that's kind of the crux of the presentation, that they are able to create a smart utility network leveraging some of their existing infrastructure. So I'll wrap it up with a case study of an actual customer that's transitioning from AMR to AMI. So let's talk a little bit about AMR. You know, for those of you who have been around the industry, I've been around for quite a long time. I've seen lots of transitions of AMR and into AMI. So AMR, automated meter reading, was first introduced in the late 1980s, early 1900s. Actually, the first, interesting enough, I think the first water solution AMR classified utility was in New Jersey, and it was actually telephone-based solution. So it wasn't the typical RF that we know today. And you think about it today, the thought process back then was everybody has a phone. We can tap into their phone system, and we'll be able to dial out. As compared to today, most people, particularly younger generation, they don't have a house phone anymore. Everything's done with cells. So that technology kind of phased itself out, but the thought back then was, okay, it's pretty stable, and most people have a telephone. And it was a good technology, except when you got into a high transient area where there was actually people that couldn't afford telephones, which you just didn't think was possible. But it actually was. It actually was. So it was a good, stable neighborhood, and people were paying their bills, and they weren't moving around a lot. The telephone base worked very well. But then they moved into an RF frequency platform. The catalyst for this to move to AMR and the technology advancement was access. The primary driver was the inside set. And I know in the water industry specifically, 40% of the meters are inside of a basement or an inside set. And at one time, prior to the 70s or 80s, usually somebody was home, and it was very easy to get to those meters. Wasn't really that big of a deal. But as demographics changed and there was, two people going into work, became harder and harder for utilities to get inside homes and get access to those meters. So this was a key driver for AMR. So access to the inside sets was the first driver. Meter reading costs, because it was very costly to keep running out to homes and not being able to get in, and then have set up special meter readings on a weekend or something. The vehicles became more expensive. Labor costs began to increase. Security of employees, and even injuries. So those kind of things, with the introduction of AMR, they were able to justify and get access to those meters. So we saw some of the early adopters. Interesting enough, gas was the first vertical market, to be one of the high adopters as far as doing AMR. And there was a lot of inside sets up in the Northeast and also in the Midwest. So large gas utilities were the first, then electric, and then followed by water. So AMR was first introduced, and it was typically a technology that was AMR. It was and it wasn't a migratable solution back when it was first introduced. And again, the primary benefits of AMR was access to meters and monthly meter readings. So two forms of AMR is a walk-by solution and a drive-by, and both are still applicable today. And a large portion of the market today, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, is still doing AMR platforms. In AMI, advanced metering infrastructure, this became an industry buzzword probably in the early or late 1990s. Utilities wanted to get, particularly the electric utilities were driving this. They wanted more frequent reads, and they wanted two-way communication. So we started to, the industry started to migrate towards AMI. And this was a move away from AMR because this did not require manual intervention. So it was typically a tower-based, pull-based application that allowed utilities to get frequent reads, more data, more frequently. They were able to get hourly data. From an electric standpoint, it was much easier because there was no batteries. The water and gas, which are still mostly battery operated today, we had to wait till the battery technology improved over time, and it did, and it allowed us to get more frequent reads hourly and transmit more frequently than once a day. We were able to do this 6 times a day. So what that did was it improved accuracy, the availability of billing and consumption data. Utilities didn't have to wait once a month to get information. They were getting it on a daily access to it. It took into account things for reduction in costs, like no truck rolls, as I mentioned. No physical individual had to go out and collect the reads or do a drive-by or a walk-by. Security of employees started to improve because they weren't involved in the retrieval of reads anymore. So the primary goal of the technology was the consumption and the billing data. But then, as we were able to have collectors on tower bases or poles, we started collecting data from different areas within the utility. So this allowed the utilities to focus on the return on investment outside of the meter reading, because primarily, if you just took meter reading and the money you were going to save on meter reading, your payback wasn't as quick. And so when you're able to expand it across your enterprise, you get a quicker return on investment. So with that, the numbers for the market, at least on the water market, 2019 from the Scott report, were about 7.3 million radios were shipped into the water market. If I go back 10 years prior to that, 2010 somewhere, was about 5.2 million. So an increase of about 2 million radios over that 10-year period. Now, granted, those were all not new installs. Some of those were replacements, but you can see that the industry has increased its movement into radio shipped and installed in the industry. But the interesting thing here is you look at the numbers. 20 years ago, back in 2000, when AMI was really coming of age, and people were taking a second look from walk-by, drive-by into AMI and what the benefits were, the market was shipping about 10% of its radios were going into an AMI platform, and about 90% were still doing AMR, walk-by, drive-by. 20 years later, with the advancement of technologies and also the different applications, the return on investment, the market today is about 40% into AMI and about 60% still AMR. So AMR is still a very viable solution. Utilities are looking of ways to transition from AMR into AMI, which is some of the things that I'll talk to you about today, ways that they're able to do that, and the different benefits that they'll see with an AMI solution over an AMR. But AMR is still a very viable, cost-efficient application for utilities that are looking for monthly meter readings, ways of reducing some of their costs, and just focusing on meter reading and getting a bill out the door. So with the advancement of technologies, one of the things that really was a game changer for the industry, particularly in water, was a migratable technology. So as the market started shifting from AMR to AMI, radio technology vendors began to change their technology to reflect that change towards an AMI. And they knew customers somewhat needed convinced, so what was developed was a migratable radio. So somewhere around 2000, in the year 2000, it's off a couple of years, maybe plus or minus, but vendors began to offer what was known to the market as a migratable solution. And what that was allow the customer to kind of transition as they needed to. So they could buy a radio that today was an AMR solution, and as they found more benefits through AMI, or as they budgeted, they were able to transition that radio from a walk-by, drive-by solution to an AMI. And they began to see the benefits of that. And so, at one time, the radios were either AMR or they were AMI, and they weren't both. This became pretty much of a game changer, and The key was to have a radio that allowed you to transition at your own pace. So it was a future proof of their selection of a vendor or a technology. So they were free to do AMI all at once if that's the path they wanted to take. They could do a slow migration from AMR to AMI as they budgeted or their budgets allowed. It also gave them flexibility. In some cases, if they had a high density of meters deployed, they might want to do AMI. And if they had a less dense, more rural population, and they still wanted to do their drive-by, they could have a mixture of solutions. So AMR based on their needs. So they were strategically able to place these AMI radios, and they were getting more data quicker. They were satisfying their needs, their budgetary requirements. They were able to look at strategically placing these radios, and also from a tactical standpoint. So something that was hard to access, or it was just costing them a lot of money. So it was really a game changer, and it's the driver today for most technologies. And most vendors today provide a migratable solution that allows customers to move at their own pace. So next, talk a little bit about the water cycle. Now, the water cycle has always been there. This is a picture of getting the water from the source and moving it along through the treatment, down through the distribution, and how we deliver it to our customers, all the way back through the wastewater application. So it's the whole water cycle. We look at it differently now, and I've mentioned this a couple times now, how we used to look at systems and applications and technology years ago. When it was, we didn't have the ability to do AMI and apply AMI across the whole water cycle, we looked at it from a bits and pieces standpoint. So for example, the water treatment plant, they weren't able to have monitoring applications that would go in through an AMI solution. It was a one system for their application. The distribution piece of it, how we deliver the water to the customers, that was another vendor that was able to take a meter read and get that information back to the utility office and service our customers. And then wastewater treatment was a separate entity by itself. Now with AMI, some of the things that we're able to do through an AMI solution is, look at water quality. We would not have been able to look at water quality applications or solutions through AMI years ago. So just by installing standard sensors and monitoring equipment, we're able to monitor things like turbidity, pH, chlorine, and bring that into our AMI. So that brings on the whole cycle through the AMI solution. The movement of water. This is very critical from a distribution standpoint. So sensors, again, monitoring pressure, water levels, flow, this all contributes to the efficiency of delivery of water to our customers, which is key, and as what we do from a water utility perspective. So leaks and asset management, unaccounted for water, very costly to utilities. Overall, there's a big push. Some are worse off. Some utilities are worse off than others as far as unaccounted for water. So always looking for ways to improve unaccounted for water. One of the ways we can look for it is through acoustic monitoring applications on our distribution lines. This is all part of an AMI solution. So all these things that we look at from the water cycle are all now encompassing, and I think from an enterprise perspective and the way we look at justifying an AMI solution, we want to know how much of that overall water cycle are we able to include in this AMI solution so we can become more efficient. So the view of the solution and the technology and the applications has broadened, and it's become much more efficient for a utility perspective to be able to justify and move forward with an AMI solution. They got to make sure they've got the right vendor. and the right applications and solutions that'll go along with it. Okay, so the previous slide talked a little bit about the overall water cycle. This is just more from an internal look at who benefits within the utility and how they benefit from it. So there's probably more than just billing and metering that benefits a little bit from an AMR application, but it's limited. As I mentioned before, you're able to get a meter read. You're able to get some other minor information, such as possibly some minimal data, maybe leak information, and so on and so forth. But again, the primary objective was billing and metering. When we move to AMI, and we go beyond just meter reading and billing, and now we've got demand management, asset management, customer service, which can be used under AMR also, but the operations and the engineering team, the planning, wastewater, all these different areas within the utility are able to take information, use it to their advantage, and become more efficient. So it not just services the sections of the utility, but also the internal people that are working the system to try to make things better and overall improve efficiency, save costs, and deliver a quality product to their customers. All right, so now I'll talk a little bit about current trends. We want to take some time to review what other utilities are looking at and how they are positioning themselves to AMI networks. So there was some surveys taken within the market, and some of the slides that I'll be pulling up and talking about are some of the responses we got back of how utilities are perceiving their operations and what they're looking at to improve, how they're able to justify, and so on and so forth with an AMI perspective. So market trends, as I talked about, here are the top spending areas. Number one is aging infrastructure. This has always been talked about. What they talk about here is, a lot of utilities, particularly larger cities, some of the what we call the NFL cities, have aging infrastructure, pipes that need upgraded, replaced, older systems that, when you watch the 6 o'clock news, you see a leak in the street and there's a big geyser going up. That's because the pipes have broken. So very costly. There's a lot of money being allocated towards replacing pipes and making things better so that they don't run into this. And then second, at 57%, their response was AMI meters. Now, when they talk about AMI meters, this is how we look at it differently now too. We're not just talking about meters that measure flow and consumption. An AMI meter is a meter that is going to provide different information and data that we did not receive over time. Before, it was just standard. You got a meter read and you got an ID number. Now, utilities want to employ meters that are able to look at leaks, pressure, temperature, low flow and no flow. They're talking about shutoff valves. Are they able to do a remote shutoff with these meters? And so these are things that are valuable, provide more information and more data to the utility, help them become more efficient. And even from a shutoff perspective, let's talk about how that trend is progressed over the years, and how this COVID situation makes us look at the shutoff meters from, actually you can look at it from two perspectives. One is, if you don't have the resources to go into the field to do a shutoff for a customer, and I know most utilities are not doing shutoffs today, but let's just say when this is all over and they get back to it, that this is a way, if they got in that predicament again, they would be able to do it remotely. But from a humanitarian perspective, if you have a meter that you can do a turn on or a turn off, in this environment today where somebody had a meter that was shut off and you wanted to provide them water again because they're not able to get out and be able to be able to get water if they needed to, or even pay their bills because they're not working, you're able to turn that meter back on from a humanitarian perspective. So those are two ways of looking at it, because most people looked at it prior to this incident, I think, as to shutting off a meter, and now remotely, without the bodies to be able to be dispatched to the field, you can turn that meter back on. Or even those that have shut-off valves that have a trickle effect. So you'd allow to turn that meter on to where that customer could get a drink of water. They might not be able to take a shower because it's not providing that much water, but it's at least allowing them to get water from that perspective. Non-revenue, we mentioned this before, leaks and theft. Non-revenue water could be for utility anywhere from 5% to 30% that they have unaccounted for water, and they're trying to do everything they can to figure out where that water loss is. And then AMR, interesting enough, it's number 4, where if you went back and another 10 years ago, that would probably be number 2 behind aging infrastructure. So this is how some of the trends have moved over the years. These are what the utilities are saying are their high priorities from their tech spending areas. Okay, so AMI status. Another thing, the utilities were quizzed on what is your status? Where are you in this funnel? What are you actually doing? So on the left, it says the overall topic was, when will AMI meters reach a majority of your customers? So if you take the top 3 of where they are within a 3-year cycle, 58% of the utilities surveyed said within 3 years, their AMI meters will reach that customer base. If it's within the next 5 years, 18% of those surveyed, and only about 10% of the utility survey said it's 10 years or greater, or they're not really sure where it's going to be in their discussions. The pie chart on the right talks about the status of the AMI project. So 34% are either budgeted, their budgets have been approved, or they're in the process of deploying an AMI project to this date. So 52% are in discussion. They haven't made their decision yet. They're looking at various technologies, either talking to different vendors or examining different technologies, but they're in discussion and they plan on moving forward probably within the next 3 to 5 years. Only 10% or 14% are unsure. They don't know at this point whether they're going to stay where they are. Most likely those are utilities that are very small, and as we all know, in the water space, there's about 52,000 registered water utilities. Some of those could be as small as 500 meters. And so there's some very small ones that they don't feel they can justify even an AMR solution. So they're sticking with AR, or they're just waiting for things to change in the marketplace. So interesting as far as how customers are moving. All right, so from a most important smart water meter and their benefits, again, number 1, smart meter, AMR and AMI, and this kind of goes back to what I mentioned before in my previous discussion. Think about smart meters. Don't just think about a standard meter that is registering, like a direct read meter or something that you're just going to get a meter read out of it or an ID number. These are advanced meters that are, as the industry is progressing, is providing you more than just a meter read. Leak detection, again, pressure, temperature, those kind of things. 87%, that's what they're looking at, is most important from their smart water benefits. And so it's the metrology, it's the AMI technology, but it goes all the way down to the meter now. And then leak detection, again, very high. Data analytics, what kind of infrastructure they have, whether it's a point-to-point, multi-point, or cellular application. All right, so we'll talk about their top concerns. And I think budgets. I mean, budgets are very important in every aspect of our life, particularly in business, not only from a utility perspective, but every day-to-day business. So budgets are the number one thing that are of a concern to customers, either from something they deployed years ago that was AMR, and they're saying, okay, we got to get to this next generation. How are we going to transition this to costs today of implementing and bringing everything in together? That's why it's very important to look at the overall water cycle and look at what other applications they can do to improve their return on investment. Only a small percentage, 16% say they have a lack of knowledge. I mean, there's either from an AMR or AMI perspective, most utilities are aware of the type of technology that's in the market. They may not be aware of the different things that they need to look at that's important to them and really is an overall cost savings to them over a 20-year life cycle. You know, always being the cheapest is not the best. It's very important when you're looking at something is what is my cost over the expected life of my system. So sometimes the bottom number looks pretty good, but when you start to put pen and pencil to something and you try to justify it and look at your actual cost over the life of the solution, it ends up being more costly in the end. So it's important to understand not just from an upfront cost, capital and operational, but what is it going to cost me over the life? And so with this being the top concern, our costs and budgets, this is a good segue into where I'm going with the utility when I talk about this case study of how they looked at their AMR solution. They knew that it served them well at the time, but they had their eye on moving to AMI, and they were trying to figure out how do we leverage what we have and look forward and be the most cost-effective way to get us where we want to go. So with that, I'm going to talk about this case study of a particular customer that we worked with our technology. And as I mentioned, it's an AMR to AMI migration using FlexNet EasyLink. And I'll explain a little bit more about EasyLink. But this was a great opportunity for this utility to use what they had and move forward to where they wanted to go. So let me give you a little background on Eagle Mountain, Utah. So it's north central Utah. It's about 30 miles south of Salt Lake City. Very, very up and coming little town. All that whole Salt Lake City area, if you haven't been around there lately, it's just very developing and growing very fast. And there's just these small towns are growing at a very fast pace. So they're up about 55% growth since 2010. Right now, they're at a population of about 27,700. They're projected, based on their growth rate, in the next 20 years to be up to 120,000 residents. That's phenomenal how fast they're growing. It's it sits right in the foothills of the mountains, and it's a very pretty setting. The median income is about 68,000. Very young, progressive demographics. The median age is about 19. They've got a very low unemployment rate. And, you know, some of the pros and cons of living there is very attractive, as I said. You know, they're close to Salt Lake. They're close to ski, and it's a beautiful environment as far as being at the foothills of the mountains. Educated population, the job growth or job opportunities in the Salt Lake area is very positive and progressive. Some of the cons is the cost of living right now is very high. They do have some, with their growth, some air quality issues and the growth in the sprawl. So sometimes it takes you a long time to get somewhere you need to go, and but as that builds up, it'll take them less time to commute. So very nice area. Been there several times. and it's a great place to just growing very fast. So they have about 9,000 water services. They're doing about 85 new taps per month, or about 1,000 approximately annually. And they implemented AMR drive-by back in 2010. And again, remember what I said about 2010 and prior. AMR was 90% of the deployments in the market, the water, and I'm talking about water here. So they were very trendy, and AMR did for them whatever they needed to do at the time. So it was their lowest cost platform. They did a phased development of it, and they were able to use their existing meters. And to them, this was the best bang for their buck. They were able to get meter reads a little bit quicker and more efficiently than they were manually, and automated. And so it was an excellent first step. They were not looking at AMI at the time. They thought this is a way for us to go. The minuses today, as they look at it today, knowing what the technology is in the market, is it doesn't automate their entire process. It's still manual intervention, and still requires a body or two to go out and collect. It's the speed of collection, because it takes them a couple days. It took them a couple days to go out and get these reads. It's a very sprawled out area, so driving their whole system took them a long time. So more expensive life cycle costs compared to a fixed pace when they started looking at the numbers. And their question is, okay, we know we have to move. How are we going to get there? So this fast-paced population, as I mentioned before, it made AMI very attractive. They wanted to improve their customer service with daily reads and water consumption monitoring. They wanted to do office-based final reads, because doing final reads, again, was very costly for them to jump in a vehicle and drive across town, which could take them quite a bit. And if they were all sprawled out, it took them a lot of time, and just get more detailed customer information. They wanted to reduce their operating costs, particularly meter reading costs, gas, personnel, vehicle, insurance, and all that that's standard with a utility, maintenance costs. And as they grew, they wanted to hire more labor. They wanted to put it in other areas that they thought would be more efficient. So not so much meter reading, but more essential positions within the utility. And security was another driver for them. So, and customer safety. So these are kind of things that they looked at to get them to AMI, and how do we get to that point? So they did a technology review. And some of their technology acceptance criteria was they wanted smart meter compatibility. Who could I go to from a vendor perspective that would give me the technology I needed and get the information out of there? Somebody that was a proven leader in the industry, that had a large installed base, and can also provide them a migratable drive-by fixed-base platform, because they weren't ready to actually jump into AMI right out of the gate, but they wanted to operate their drive-by until they could budget and do a smooth transition. Leak detection was another thing. So from a customer perspective, and also from a distribution line monitoring capability. And then it was expandable, something that they could deploy, and they were able to expand on it, and it would be an easy way for them to move. What were their challenges? They had some budget constraints. Even though they're fast growing, a lot of their budgets were in maintenance or new sets. They already had an existing technology. They already had existing assets. They had about 8,000 or so drive-by applications with Itron ERTs. They knew that they wanted to move to a new technology, but they also knew that they couldn't go and ask for money to pull everything out and place a new technology and just rip their existing assets out. And so they wanted to figure out, how do they get there without operating two systems? So they wanted to find a vendor they could integrate into a single platform. They did not want to operate two different systems. This is something that was a challenge for them. And until we came out with the EasyLink solution, they thought this is the path they were going to go. And so Part of the retraining too, the field operators and the new office personnel and new platform, they want to minimize that as much as they could. From an administrative perspective, they wanted a simple transition. Time and effort were an important factor, so not to spend a whole lot of time moving people over. So it was important to get the buy-in in the overall process and make sure it was ease of use. Meter readers, they wanted a single reading solution for both technologies. In other words, they didn't want, as I mentioned, they were going to continue with their drive-by for a while. They didn't want to have two pieces of equipment in the utility cab that have to read it and operate. So something that was ease of operations and mapping features and those kind of standard things they were looking for. So along came EasyLink, and this is kind of a game changer in the industry as far as being able to read multiple vendors and providing a quick path to an AMI platform. So all the things that we talked about before, movement of water, leaks and asset management, water quality, two-way applications, shut-off valves, being able to add different assets and technologies such as lighting and sensors, smart gateways. That's where they wanted to go, and they wanted an easy way to get there, and EasyLink was a bridge product for them to get to their AMI solution. And I'll talk a little bit about how they were able to use that, or they are using it to get to that platform. So it's comprised of three components. There's a reader, the portable-based radio device, and it reads both FlexNet Sensus smart points and installed ERT simultaneously. So they're able to get rid of their ERT reader and use an EasyLink reader, drop it into a utility vehicle, drive their regular routes, and read ERTs and smart points, and take all that back to their database and build from that application. The software is the mobile application software, GPS-based mapping. It's got map information, allows the utility to easily navigate through their system. Simple on-screen alerts and route alerts, statistics, and real-time data transfer. The thing about this is kind of a game changer and also new to the industry somewhat is the fact that this is a database or a server-based application. So the utility is able to receive information from the back-end software or operator real time when they're out in the field if they need to make adjustments. So that's the WorkSpace application, which is browser-based. So as they collect the reads, they're able to send the information through a cellular connection, some type of IP addressable connection back to the office. So they don't have to wait till they drive back and hand the operator a thumb drive and have them load it. They can do it real time if they need. So this was important to them, and this increased their time to collect the reads and also time to bill, and the operators were able to bill a lot quicker. So this met their needs. As I mentioned, key to them was, hey, I've got this installed base. How can I still use it as it's still working and transition and get to the next phase that I need to? So here's basically how it works. So as I mentioned, you've got your installed base of Itron ERTs. So from day one, they didn't have to do anything with them. As they died or they had a new meter set, they would install smart points. So now the EasyLink reader is able to go out and read both. So their maintenance budget that they had for dying ERTs or new installs now went to smart points. So they didn't have a whole lot of budget increase as far as going back and asking for more money to replace the system. So they transitioned over time. So they installed both. They stopped installing ERTs and everything was new or replacement was a smart point. And they continue to install those smart points throughout the system as they leave their ERTs in the ground until they fail or they get a new set. As they get an area populated or they want to target an area that's new and high growth, they're able to put up a tower. That tower will hear those migratable smart point radios, and now part of that system becomes an AMI solution. While they continue to do their drive-by as they need to, they've got an interchangeable solution that's both drive-by and fixed base. As those deployments continue and they start to take over more areas, they just add the tower. So once they are done with their ERTs and they're no longer deployed, now the solution is transitioned at their pace, at their budget, to be able to be now a fixed-base solution and get them all the information that they need from a technology that they were looking for. So very smooth transition. As I mentioned, this is a bridge product to move forward. What does it look like from a drive-by solution? You've got your EasyLink reader that collects both the ERTs, smart points, processes data through the workbook, through the workspace, and there's a route import and export process through the CIS billing system. This is a process that they were very familiar with, so it was an easy transition for them to move to. Now, once they move to an AMI platform, as I mentioned, you had the base station. That data that's coming in from the smart points goes to the RNI, to our census analytics platform, the CIS, and they continue to read their ERTs as needed, and smart points even if they're still in a drive-by mode. So the data flow process is easily mapped. They understand it, and it's a process that they can easily transition to. The benefits they got from it, I know we're getting tight on time here, so I want to kind of wrap it up. Key, as I mentioned, and this is the subject of this, was moving to a smart utility using existing assets. They did not have to pull out their existing installed beta ERTs. They remained operational. So they had no stranded assets at the time. And we are doing this application with multiple utilities today, and this EasyLink solution and those that were reading drive-by with Itron ERTs, we're up to about reading over 500,000 ERTs today with this type of solution as those customers transition to AMI. So it's very important to them. It's an eye-opener whenever they're able to see this. No need for dual applications. And as I mentioned, the server base is it's quicker to time to process the bills, find the routes quicker because they can send it over the air to the man that's in the field working it. And capital expenditures pretty much for Eagle Mountain remain neutral, as I mentioned. Most utilities have a maintenance budget or a budget for new installs. They just transfer those dollars from one vendor to the next, and it allows them to get to the next platform. What are some additional benefits from a meter and a smart point standpoint? 15 and 5-year warranty. Census has a 15-year warranty on their smart points and on their iPearl meters, so the low capital investment, easy transition to a fixed-base platform. Single vendor was important to them. They wanted somebody that was a meter and radio component, as again, somebody that was in the market a long time, had a large installed base. So that's something that they were interested in, and other customers that we're working with, brand recognitions and something to get to. So EasyLink is a gateway, as I mentioned before. It's a FlexNet drive-by to fixed base, key transitional tool, gets us to the platform from the overall water cycle, metrology piece of it, lighting, smart gateways, which allows us to monitor sensors, and ally meters, which is a shut-off pressure temperature meter that's we're promoting in the marketplace also. So here's some of the feedback from the customer. Gets data in a fast and accurate manner. That means the world to us. Process used to take 2 technicians 2 days. Now it can be done with 1 technician in the same amount of time. And they're hoping for a little bit more fine tuning. They can get down to 1 technician collecting meters in a single day. So very interested in or satisfied with the movement along and their transition. And just to kind of wrap it up, both AMR and AMI provide key benefits to utilities. You need to understand where you are, where you want to go as a utility, and how you're going to get there. These are kind of some of the factors in the decision of moving to an AMI platform, and leveraging your installed platform eases the transition, either from a migratable solution or, in this case, one vendor to the next. And planning is key to successful deployment. So that's it. I know I'm close to time, and so that's hopefully I was able to educate you on some things and demonstrate how we're moving using the existing platform. And I'll turn it back over to Connor.
Thank you, Tom, for discussing how utilities can efficiently migrate from AMR without having to abandon their existing assets. Now we will jump into our question and answer session. So we have a handful of questions here, so we'll try to get through them in the next 10 minutes here. So to start off, question for you, Tom. In today's unique environment, are you seeing more interest in an AMI solution?
Yes, and here's why I say that. I mean, I know the industry, as I mentioned, most inquiries are how do we get to an AMI solution. I just saw some recent survey information from actually several consultants and some direct responses that we actually sent out to our customer base about AMI. The majority of them came back and said either this has reemphasized our need to look to AMI from this current environment we live in from COVID, to where we've had to restrict employees down to essential business and even cut back and had a lot of people work remotely or furlough people. So if they were in their deployment phase or they had recently deployed, the response back was that just reinforced them that they made the right decision. If they're looking and they're very close, they're saying that this situation has accelerated their desire to move towards that, because they can see how it's going to benefit them in the future, and it would have benefited them had they had it deployed. So yes, they're actually looking at it much closer now.
Okay, great. Now a second question. This question is from Carlos. What's the average battery life of a census meter in an AMI environment?
I will just tell you what our warranty is, that we we test our batteries to have a 20-year life. Now we do a standard in an AMI solution. You will read the meter once an hour and transmit every 4 hours. Based on those calculations and that standard transmit rate and meter sample rate, we have a battery life expectation of 20 years.
Okay, great. And we have actually a second question from Carlos. Do current AMI platforms support meters from different manufacturers?
That's an excellent question. And yes, they do. Most of the top vendors have a cross agreement with other vendors. I know we do with all the key manufacturers. So what happens is, if a new meter comes on board, we will talk to that meter vendor. I'll just throw a name out there, Neptune. They'll submit a meter to us. We'll test it and qualify it for compatibility. We actually publish on our website a list of compatible meters that we've tested, that we can get a meter read and an ID, and vice versa. They will do it with us in our vendors or our meters. So when we run into new meters, we have an agreement and kind of keep an open relationship with those vendors so that they can test our meters and we test theirs, vice versa. because we know there's customers that have preferences for meters and AMI technology, and we don't want to restrict ourselves.
Okay. All right, we have another question here from Michael. Does EasyLink work with only Census and Itron ERTs, or will it work with other vendors' radio units? Also, is it only available as drive-by AMR, or is it compatible with AMI/fixed network systems?
Excellent question. Today, the EasyLink solution is compatible with Itron radios, and it works in a drive-by platform. We are not able to read Itron radios in a fixed base platform, so it's limited at this time to drive-by and to Itron.
Okay, great. Now another question here is from a Ken. Can you compare the benefits of Xylem to emerging low power wide area technologies like LoRaWAN or cellular NB IoT?
I would say that our technology is more of a proven technology, and we've got a large installed base. Those other emerging technologies are up and coming. They offer some benefits to it, but most of the things that the LoRa and the NOIT are offering, we do from a Census platform. In other words, so the key to some of the features that all the vendors talk about is the ability to read multiple sensors and multiple platforms, and we can do that from a Census perspective. So we've got a primary license, so we've got no one else can get on our bandwidth, and there's a lot less noise. So the reliability of our network is much more stable and reliable with our FlexNet network than I would say would be on the other platforms.
Okay, great. And I think we have time for at least one more question here. We have a question from Simon. Are all the iPearl meters compatible with AMR and AMI systems?
From a Census perspective, iPearl meters are compatible with AMR and AMI. Most of the third-party vendors that we deal with, I would say yes. What we produce out of an iPearl meter and most other third-party meters produces what is called a UI 1203 protocol, and that's a standard protocol for meter reading, and that's the kind of data that comes out of the meter. And most of the vendors that I'm familiar with in the industry know how to read a UI 1203 protocol, so they should be compatible with an iPearl meter. But you would have to check with that particular radio vendor that you're looking at and see if they've qualified that meter. If they haven't, we'd be free to give them that meter to qualify.
Okay, great. All right, let's see. We can get another question in here. We got a couple more minutes. How many utilities are using the EasyLink solution, and or how many radios are being read?
We're at about a dozen utilities that are reading with EasyLink and transitioning from Itron to FlexNet. That doesn't sound like a lot, but the important thing is that, as I mentioned before, that represents over 500,000 radios. And I would say by the end of this year or early next year, we'll be well over 1 million. We are in discussion with several utilities and plan to transition to those utilities sooner rather than later. And so that's a key number to be able to read another vendor's technology through a technology that we're providing in the marketplace.
Okay, great. And we are just about at time, so I just want to thank you again, Tom, for providing solutions on a smart utility network resulting in immediate cost savings. And that concludes our webinar on how to create a smart utility network leveraging existing infrastructure. But before we go, I want to thank you all for joining the webinar today. And don't forget to participate in the survey immediately following the webinar. Thanks.